But there is an intense, furious activity going on in our minds, in our hearts. And only a fraction of that activity is translated into physical activity. So he says, you have to work. Even God has to work. He has nothing to gain. The Lord of the peoples, the Lord of the universe, has no need to work. But he works because if he were to stop from working, even for a second, all the worlds would go to perdition. So, even a liberated man, even a man who has fulfilled himself in knowledge, has got to work. Got to work for himself, for God, and for the peoples. And how to work? How to change the character of our work? First is to accept whatever assignment one has, whatever position one finds himself in, as intended for him. It is no use grumbling and always complaining that this work is not fitted for me and this is small work, I want bigger work. Whatever work comes, once a person is awakened and becomes a seeker of higher values of life, he learns to accept whatever conditions he finds himself in as intended for his growth, the best suited for his spiritual evolution. He accepts the work and he begins by performing works as an offering to God. It is as a sacrifice, an offering to God, that one does works. The word that the Gita uses is translated in English as sacrifice. But sacrifice has a connotation of some pain, giving up something which one wants. But that's not the real meaning of the word yajna. It is consecration. You offer whatever you are going to do to the divine. And in so doing, the character of the work changes. It stands consecrated, made sacred. You first make a mental formation, a mental determination that the day's work I offer to the divine. Mentally, you call the divine and say, I offer this work. And you start doing that work as an outflow of your being. It is a channel for the flow of your energies towards the divine. With the result that the quality of the work improves. You are surely not going to make a flawed offering to the divine. You would like to make it as perfect, as neat, as beautiful as you would like, because it is being accepted and given as your labor of love to the divine. The entire motivation changes. It does not matter what work it is. We, from our human standpoint, are accustomed to make distinctions of small work and big work, low work and high work, menial work, manual work and intellectual work. But for the divine, who watches from the summits, all work is same. Whatever the form of work, whatever the nature of work, the value of work to the divine lies in the attitude in the spirit with which you do the work. Whether the work is productive spiritually or counterproductive spiritually depends upon the spirit with which you do, the attitude with which you approach the work. It is not that all the time you go on repeating, I offer. No. At the commencement of the work, you gather yourself, pray for a moment, and as a part of the prayer, you offer the work. And you commence. Naturally, you get caught up in the work, you get identified with the work, but now and then, maybe after an hour or two, you suspend the work for half a minute, a few seconds, and then remember and renew your offering. This kind of periodical suspension mentally, remembrance and reconsecration keeps that current of offering flowing, and you will find a certain joy in the work. However mechanical the work may be in appearance, once it is made a channel of flow towards the divine, it gives a joy, a kind of felicity, and you are no more working with a fevered excitement or a kind of boredom which is normal to many of our daily actions. And the true test whether you have offered the works to the divine is how do you view the results of the work. Once you have offered the work to the divine, you have no right to demand or expect a particular result. It is left to him, left to the master of works. What he does with our labor, what fruits of work he gives. One develops a certain equality and renounces one's claim to the fruit of works. That's the first stage. The second stage is you not only renounce the claim to the fruit of works, but also to the choice of work. You don't have egoistic preferences. I want this work and not that work. Whatever work comes, you give the whole of your being and do it as best as you can. And next is the sense of the doer, that I am doing things, my capacities, my cleverness. These feelings have to subside, and you have to invoke the power of God, the flow of the God's power, strength to work through you. You convert yourself into an instrument of God. You are not an independent doer or worker, but an instrument. And in the measure of your sincerity of dedication, sincerity of cause, you will find a new kind of energy, a new force coursing through your veins, and you find that you are only the channel, and a certain higher force, a higher energy flows through you and does the work. And as this develops, at the end of the work, at the end of the day, you will find you will have no fatigue. When there is fatigue at the end of the day's work, it means that there has been a flaw in your attitude to work. You have exercised a personal claim in the work. But when you offer and function as a channel, as an instrument of the divine and the higher force, higher energies, there is no fatigue. And with the increase of this element of identification with the divine energies, with the higher consciousness that flows through you, you begin to understand, you begin to know something of the divine wisdom, of the divine consciousness. And alongside your work, some love, some devotion develops in the heart. And each moment of work becomes an occasion of joy. Because you are related to the divine not only through work, but through a willing love or devotion or sentiment that surges up and backs up the work or activity. So what starts as a discipline of works, a yoga of works, gradually develops another dimension, and that is the dimension of devotion and love. You proceed in that direction, and the crown of love is knowledge. Not a mental knowledge, but in your being, in your consciousness, you begin to know the infinity of the divine, the all-pervasive nature of the divine, and that the divine is not only everywhere, but is in you also. So thus takes place a union with the divine on three levels. You start with ordinary work, but it culminates in a threefold union with the divine. Union at the level of works, which is another name for consecration of willpower. It is the human will that expresses itself in action. So at the level of will, there is an offering. At the level of the heart, there is an efflorescence of love and devotion and identification. And at the level of the mind, there is an understanding. An union in understanding of the omnipresence of God and the omnipotence of God. This is the doctrine of works, the gospel of works given in the Gita. It has been later developed by other saints and yogis, particularly Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, and they have made the field of action, this world, as the legitimate field for spiritual growth through works. So, once one enters this broad spectrum of total spiritual growth, a comprehensive spiritual identity with God, work becomes a means for one's growth. It is easy enough to sit in a study or a prayer room and read, study, meditate, pray and feel fine, feel even a thrill of the descent of the divine consciousness. But the moment you come out and you have to meet people, you have to perform normal actions, your old nature comes up. Actually, you become more sensitive, more irritable with ordinary contacts, and you are unable to face the world. It is to remedy this, there arises a gulf between the spiritual growth and the outer world. Very painful, very difficult, and it is the ancient traditions got over the difficulty by simply rejecting the world, saying that the world is false, the world is a temptation. You withdraw and merge in the divine consciousness. But no, the Gita says, this world is the field where you are appointed to work. You have to learn to work in a different spirit. Utilize work as a means of growth in consciousness. As long as work is a mechanical chore, it doesn't contribute anything to your inner development. But if you learn to convert works as a means for the growth of consciousness, the field of work as a field for testing your inner growth, whether you have really acquired equality, whether you have really acquired equanimity, it is to be tested when you are with 10 people working together. It is easy enough to maintain one's equality in a forest, in a hermitage, in a place like this. But in the midst of life, in a city, in a factory, in an office, where you have to rub shoulders with 100 people, developing situations, what's the attitude? So a seeker uses the field of work as a testing ground for his inner growth, for his to test the gains of his inner life, and also to assure for himself that the growth, that the changes are not subjective but are true, objective also. So work becomes a means for the growth of consciousness. And after one has arrived, works do not stop. Work, the field of works, becomes the field for the manifestation, for the confirmation and putting out in the world the higher consciousness, the higher values. So both before and after, before liberation and after liberation, works continue to be relevant. And one works not because one needs to work, not because one has the necessity to work, but out of a sense of duty, duty to God, a responsibility to manifest the diviner values of harmony, truth, the right. One becomes a model and an exemplar in putting out of himself what he has realized. So you will find in history, most of those who have realized the divine consciousness don't withhold themselves, but come out and work for humanity. And the Gita says, to work for the preservation of the peoples. People left to themselves, the common masses, they will only turn round and round in the circles of ignorance. It is only those who know, those who have known how to live, how to bring in new spirit in the situation, that can give the lead, that can blaze a trail which others have to follow. So the responsibility continues till one dies. And also I would add, even after one dies. One does not, such persons who have liberated themselves do not simply disappear. They continue to exist in the earth atmosphere. Their earth personality, the personality that these great beings developed, perfected, dynamized for earth, that remains as a permanent power, as a permanent source of inspiration and guidance in the earth atmosphere. Even when the inner being really withdraws and goes to the place of rest, the outer personality continues. That is how incarnations like Jesus, like Christ, Buddha, Rama, Krishna, they continue to be there. And it is because they are there, they respond to our call, they respond to our prayers, It is not a superstition. But they are there, guiding the destinies of the peoples, helping humanity, overseeing those who have faith in them, who send calls to them, responding to them. This is the doctrine of works, which elevates the whole system into something more than an activity for one's own bread. It is legitimate to earn one's bread and it is necessary. But at the same time, the same act can be converted into a means of spiritual growth for oneself and for the radiation of the right vibrations around. A person working in the right spirit, offering works to the divine, keeping a cool head because he is not personally involved, and a certain equality and imperturbable spirit, he is bound to exercise some kind of influence on his environment. Even when he doesn't speak, even when he doesn't claim, there is an automatic radiation of his impersonal vibrations, emanating calm, a kind of peace around. And when you are able to work on this basis, you will find that effectivity of one's will is increased. Because one doesn't move or work from the surface. One always relates oneself to the inner status, inner poise of detachment and offering. And that forms a kind of peace, a foundation or a basis of peace on which work proceeds. And it is a law of the world that true work, true action proceeds on a basis of peace. When the basic foundation is one of peace, silence, the work is tenfold more effective. When the basis is agitated, when the basis is uncertain, the work is unsure in its results. And we spoke of the works being offered as a sacrifice to the divine. Second is the concept of sacrifice. Sacrifice is an institution which is common to most of the older religions. They sacrifice normally physical objects. In earlier societies, they would sacrifice animals. Later on, as people became civilized, they would offer fruits, flowers and things like that. Now, the underlying truth of this sacrifice, it is not that the divine there is waiting for us and he is hungry unless we sacrifice things for him. This is an anthropomorphic conception. The truth of the matter is, sacrifice is a basic principle of creation. The Gita says that in the beginning the Lord created the peoples and the gods, and he created sacrifice. And he said, by means of sacrifice, do ye increase yourselves and grow. Men sacrifice to the gods respond, and the creation grows. So sacrifice, which is another word for interchange, that is a fundamental law of life. Nothing lives by itself. Nothing can be compartmentally separated from others. Physically, I may say I am separate. But the fact that I breathe, the fact that I speak, the fact that I think and feel, shows at these different levels I draw from around and I throw out outside of me. So there is a continuous interchange. I go on taking things and I go on putting out things, whether it is a willing thing or not. Up to a certain stage, nature compels its creatures to observe this law of sacrifice. Life grows in absorbing smaller forms of life. The trees blow, the rain pours, the earth responds. There is a continuous interchange. From the ocean, the vapor goes up. There it is received and it falls back condensed as water. That's how the Gita describes. Even in physical nature, there is a continuous interchange. And nature compels all forms, all creatures to subscribe to this law of sacrifice. When man arrives, he has a self-awareness. He resists this impulse to sacrifice. He wants everybody else to sacrifice for him, but he won't. He gathers around himself his ego, his self-interest, and he does not want to sacrifice. He raids other people's territories. He robs other people of their things and provides for himself. So he aggrandizes and he goes against the law of sacrifice. But as he develops, as he grows, he realizes that his interests are better served by a kind of compromise, some amicable arrangement by which I give something to you and you give something to me. I don't have to fight all the time. Now that is the beginning of the third order of growth of love. Love Love begins at our level as an interchange. I feel affection, I feel love, and I expect the other person also to feel the same thing. There is an exchange of emotions, there is an exchange of consciousness, culminating in a physical exchange. But at the bottom, there is this principle of interchange, giving oneself. Sacrifice is to give oneself. And the true nature of love is to give oneself. Though at the physical level, at the human level, the beginnings of love are very crude. They are essentially transactions based upon calculations. External attraction, feeling of affinity, they are all covers. But one wants to derive some pleasure, some joy from the other. And we say, I love you. And we expect the other person to say the same thing. But essentially, it is a transaction of interests. Nobody is prepared to give himself or herself entirely. As long as the response is there, as long as the recognition is there, the transaction continues. But it is a beginning. As man evolves, this selfish character of love on either side, it gradually diminishes. And one begins to love, not for what one gets from the other, but for the joy of giving oneself. That is the beginning of true love, true divine love, where one thinks of nothing else except to pour oneself, to give oneself. And the nearest approach to this true divine love is the human love of a mother for her child. The mother does not expect any kind of a return from the child. The mother is content to pour her best, her energies, her affections, her entire being on the child. That is the truest, nearest approach to the higher love. And it is thus that humanity progresses stage by stage. First, sacrifice under compulsion. Next, resistance to sacrifice. And then a correction of it by extending one's interests, starting the game of love for mutual benefit, mutual well-being. And later on, as one develops, the sense of idealism comes, the sense of self-sacrifice builds up, and the true divine love, where each one gives oneself to the other. That is the culmination of sacrifice, where there is no sense of loss, there is no sense of deprivation, but giving is a moment of joy. Giving is a moment of happiness. One feels more happy the more one gives. The more one dedicates oneself, gives oneself, the more satisfied one is, the more fulfilled one feels. And that shows that one has crossed the human frontiers and has arrived at a stage where sacrifice has fulfilled itself and tied man, nature, God. So all the three, the divinity, nature, the world and man, they are bound by this thread of love. Love which is a culmination of sacrifice. The true nature of love is self-giving, and a causeless, uncalculated giving of oneself is an operation of love. All culture, all spiritual and mental culture are steps, movements, leading one to this fine high status where one no more thinks of oneself. The self just does not exist. One only feels one with everybody. And whatever one has, it just flows. One doesn't even expect thanks. One doesn't even expect gratitude. Now here, I am going at a little tangent, but I think it will be of interest to you. We have always feel in our life that we do a lot of benefactions to others. We go to help others, do work for others. But the normal experience is that those people hit back. The recipients of our favors, the recipients of our benefactions, they turn back and do a wrong turn. And then we get resentful, we get angry, and we complain. What's this? Those whom I have not helped, those who have not been recipients of my favors, they have been kind and good. But those whom we have helped, they have turned against. Now here there is a very subtle point, and that is, when we do something good for another, if we do it purely out of feeling that it must be done, the person needs it very well. He always reacts well. But if at the back of our doing there is an expectation that the person will feel obliged, that the person will be grateful to me, that the person will remember what good I have done to him, then I impose a claim. Along with the work good that I do to that person, I impose a claim. And that subtle imposition of the claim evokes a certain response from the person, which is resentful. Each person resents being obligated to another. The underlying feeling is that I am obliged, I am obligated to that person. So that resentful part finds a way to get rid of this obligation, to shut out that obligation by turning against that person. So there are two sides. One, human nature does not like to be always under obligation. Second, the undeclared claim of the benefactor for recognition, acknowledgement, gratitude. These are the things that spoil the situation. That is why it is said, when we do with him, we must not make the other person feel that he is receiving a favor. It is one of our edicts in the Indian spiritual tradition. They say, when you do good to somebody, when you give something to anybody else, Do it as if you are receiving something. He is obliging you by receiving it. Now, with that sense of humility, love, if you do, the character of the operation changes. So we have dealt with two topics, two themes in this earlier chapters of the Gita today: the gospel of works, gospel of divine works, and the gospel of sacrifice, both of which have perennial importance and relevance to us at all times. Now I am open to questions. That's right. These are eternal truths. That's right. We see that when you work there. We see what you told. It is very patent to those who see that you work in that spirit, and that type of work, always contributes to your spiritual growth, extension of consciousness, expansion of the being. Where you don't work for yourself, you don't expect any return, but just for the doing of it, for the benefit that so many receive. And it is really work for God in humanity, for the growth of the divine consciousness in the world. It is for a cause that you are working. And the joy that accompanies that work is something, which has no talent. You do the same work for a selfish purpose, to earn your bread, it becomes mechanical. But even that work can be changed by offering it to the divine. Yes.
What it seems like, I know that I'm pretty idealistic, but I know that in reality, sometimes I look at that, it seems like I call out to a lot of work that I don't get to do when I have a child today. And so lots of times, all of a sudden, it seems like I'm sick of it. And I really, if I say it, I know I need it. But, and so instead, it seems like you said that we should not choose what kind of work or whatever. But if I didn't make a choice, everything that comes to me now is worth all that.
It's not that, because the human nature is such and the society is such that a person who is a willing worker, all the work will be put on that person's head only. So we have also always to fit in with our capacities, with the energies that are at our disposal. So we have to take on as much burden, as much responsibility, which we can honestly, conscientiously discharge. We shall not take on any more. So there is always a question of priorities, a balancing in life, a priorities. Which work is really important, both for the environment in which I am placed and the environment around. So one has to exercise certain discrimination, discernment in these matters, and do what is possible. When I say you shall not exercise the choice of work, it means always, complaining that I am in the most unfavorable circumstances. I wish I had that work of somebody else. It is wisdom to accept what one has got as something to start with. One can always improve one's position in life, but in a calm and intelligent way, and not in a grumbling, agitatingly. There are people who always think that the kind of work, like cleaning the floor, for instance, like cleaning a motor car, that it is ordinary work, but painting, music, and that's all, giving orders from the office, that is a bigger work. But it's not so. Whatever work we do, we can convert it into a golden means. And you have to exercise your intelligence in choosing your priorities.
If I think the work that I do, I love it, and I really respect it.
But there is a limit.
I know I have to question it because I do something I have to get material. I mean, I love the work, but I think I'm not practicing.
Many times, we should learn how to organize the work. An intelligent organization of the work covers larger areas than taking on works as they come. And one's own capacities and resources are to be kept in mind. One must accept in such cases only that much work which one can do at one's best. To complete a work is not important, but to do what one undertakes at one's best, that is important.
I just come to know that you say that there's a trend how long for a broader application of that, maybe past like West monastery, and all these hard work and all these social prayer and all this sort of going back and forth. But basically, that type of work which is related to a very small community of the individual himself, gardening or something like that. And it's like now there are so many movements afoot who engage in work, but that work is not the emphasis on the growth of the individual through that work, but the individual's identification with a larger whole, and the work tends to synthesize with that, so that the work becomes more embracing in a larger environment, and the emphasis becomes more and more decentralized in the person himself to the actual work.
Exactly. That is a part of the present expanding spirituality, which is shifting its focus from individual realization or fulfillment of a small community to larger and larger commitments. So it is a part of this movement for universalization that this enlarging of the areas of work in which one is engaged is taking place all over the world. It is part of the movement for the growth of a new consciousness. So it is, as you rightly said, an application of the Karma Yoga on a larger canvas, not confined to ashrams and monasteries, but in the society around. It is a rule of spiritual life which believes in growth of consciousness that every day, if every day is not possible, at least every week, one must devote some time for some unselfish work. Then one learns to go beyond oneself.
Now, suppose that the person of the attitude you described never wants to receive return for that which he gave. Now, just like yesterday, we talked about the need for force to counteract force,
Yeah.
the rule of ignorance. Now, a person with this attitude, what he qualities, these things that in science is just revealing, that motivated by such an urge, he would naturally be able to sustain himself through the reflex action of the good that he's able to appear, or in a situation where he's taken advantage of and not be able to operate from that level, being kind of started behind.
It is a situation which has been there from the beginning of civilization, of civilized people being surrounded by barbarians. So today also, though our society is economically so advanced, complicated and all that, in a sense, it is still barbarian. And idealists, people who work for spiritual ideals, and people who want to serve and all that, they have to guard themselves against the rapacity of the other elements. And it is very legitimate to safeguard one's own interests. For function, one has to function, one has to live. So one has to draw. All that I mean is one shall not exploit the others. But it is legitimate to draw from the society something which I need and refuse to be exploited myself. We have to do that. We have to draw a line.
There's no thought of returning debt. There is all debt before.
They must be very lucky people. Yes.
Especially like in a family situation,
Yes.
you not only use one thing if you're very idealistic and only reading one, you can put them in that.
Yes. That's right. Yes?
How does it work? How does it work in volunteers?
It has worked well, I should say, because it is been going on for over 50 years. And we find, particularly when we don't have to work for our bread, and there is no money economy there. Nobody earns money, and nobody is paid. So all work as a part of their yogic discipline, offering of love to the divine. So each one enjoys the work that he does. And in situations which would normally lead to friction and rivalry in the outer society, here one knows that nobody has a personal interest. There is no hierarchy. There is no higher subordinate and superior. So things work out in a spirit of accommodation. And the work is more important than my feelings or your feelings. And work gets done because each one is interested in furthering the work. And there is a certain creative joy in the work because one is free. One is not compelled by economic circumstances to do work. So most of us, though normally our office hours are maybe 8 hours, we carry our papers and our work home and enjoy doing it at home. And the quality of work has improved. And things which would require tremendous labor and time outside have been possible to be worked out in much lesser time with lesser energy. So this has proved to us that it is possible to build a society which is not based on money economy, economic interests, rivalry, but on a certain dedication to a cause, to an ideal, leaving the self behind and identifying with the collectivity. So it has worked, no doubt there are individual aberrations, they will always be there. But If one doesn't fit in, one just walks out, that's all. But there have been very few such cases where people have left. Actually, we have difficulty in keeping up, our standards by restricting admissions. By restricting, screening people and restricting admissions, it has been possible to maintain a certain level. Around about 1700 permanently staying there, and about 300 to 400 people, visitors, who like to stay there for a few months or a few weeks and participate in the work and learn the way. And again about 200 visitors who come every day to see things, they pass through our place. So normally we have about 2000 to 2200 people there. It is in the sense that we have issued an invitation to people from all over the world, and they live there not as Americans or Frenchmen or Englishmen or Indians, but as citizens of one world, practicing the ideal of human unity. All members of the township, without personal resources. There is a common pool where all things that are produced, that are received, are gathered and distributed according to the need of the settlements of the people. And there is no head as such. There is no president or chairman, no executive head. But they all meet together, people concerned, to decide the priorities and settle things in a spirit of consensus. So far, it is English, because we have found that English is the most common denominator, and we firmly believe that English will be the world language one day. It is the only language in the world which is growing, which is receiving words and ideas, thoughts, concepts from all over and assimilating it in itself. So each issue of a dictionary, year by year, will contain more words. Unlike the French, they are purist. Each word, if it is to be accepted in the French language, it has to be approved by the French Academy. That way, their growth is stunted. And English has shown amazing adaptability. Of course, people may make fun of American English and British English and another Australian English and all that. But these are local variations. Even in America itself, I have found the way English is talked in New York area is different from Kansas and from here. Somewhere they will say hello, somewhere another say they will say hi, and another place they will say how do or howdy or something like that.
How are you?
Yes, all these, but English. So our common language there is English. Though situated in India as Aurobindo is, we are encouraging people to learn the language of the immediate land, which is Tamil. And most of the Westerners have shown very great willingness to do that, and they are associating themselves with the local indigenous people, learning their language, helping them. So a good beginning has been made, but it is too early to say. We are only 11 years old there. And in Aurobindo, that planetary city, 7 miles from Pondicherry. The ashram where I stay is Sri Aurobindo ashram, Pondicherry, where we have 2000 people. Now, an extension of the ashram is there 7 miles away on the sea coast, which is called Aurobindo, the city of dawn, where so far about 500 people have been received from 20-25 countries, and they are working out this project of ideal of human unity, freedom of development of consciousness, beyond race, beyond religion, beyond traditions. Yes. Yes, it is not yet. The thing is, the whole world is so much interested in the experiment that we are receiving gifts and donations and contributions from all over the world. And we are utilizing part of it for the maintenance and part of it for capital development. No, please. No, they have no private holdings. When a person arrives, he brings what he can give by way of talent, by way of work, or by way of money, or equipment, whatever it is. And thereafter, that person is looked after and maintained, supported by the society. So within themselves, there is no money exchange. Whatever one needs, one can always draw from a common store. The day-to-day needs and things like that.
I think China has a reference to the question of those which you accept.
Yes.
Their private financial holdings, passive, those assets that you transfer.
The option is given to the persons in this sense that if you hold your private properties elsewhere from where you come and all that, you maintain yourself. You maintain yourself, whatever expenses come to, you pay for it. But if you give what you have to the ashram, to the institution, thereafter